What would you do if a billionaire threw $500 at your feet and told you to disappear? Victoria Carmichael was just a waitress at Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. Julian Blackwell was a hedge fund CEO who moved $3 billion with a phone call. He saw her as furniture. She saw him as a man about to lose $200 million. On a cold November night, during the biggest acquisition deal of his career, Julian made a fatal mistake. He humiliated the wrong woman. What Victoria did next, exposing a massive fraud in 12 minutes with surgical financial precision, didn't just save his company. It revealed she was worth $50 million and the legendary ghost investor his fund had been desperately trying to find. This is the story of how one woman's silence became the most expensive lesson a billionaire ever learned. Stay until the end and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories. And if you like it, please hit the like button. The Sterling Room didn't announce itself. Tucked between a private wealth management firm and an art gallery on East 67th Street, its entrance was marked only by a discreet brass plaque and a doorman who knew every face that mattered. Inside, the restaurant existed in a realm of hushed luxury, velvet banquettes the color of aged wine, marble floors that swallowed sound, and crystal chandeliers that cast amber light like liquid gold. The air smelled of truffle oil, seared duck, and old money. This was where Manhattan's elite came not to be seen, but to conduct the business of being powerful. Victoria Carmichael moved through this world like a ghost. At 32, she had perfected the art of invisibility. Her black uniform was immaculate, her dark hair pulled into a tight, practical bun, her movements economical and silent. She didn't walk so much as glide, anticipating needs before they were voiced, refilling wine glasses at the exact moment they reached half empty, clearing plates with hands that never rattled silverware. In 5 years at the Sterling Room, she had become a fixture, reliable, unremarkable, and utterly forgettable. That was precisely the point. Table 12 needs their check, Tori. Harrison Webb, the general manager, barely glanced at her as he polished a wine glass behind the bar. His British accent had grown sharper during his 20 years in New York, especially when he was anxious. Tonight, his hands moved faster than usual. On it, Victoria replied softly. Her voice had lost its edges over the years, smoothed into something deferential and easy to dismiss. She folded the leather billfold around the check, one date need $47 for 2 people, and delivered it with a practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. The couple at table 12 didn't look at her. They never did. She was furniture, a service appliance. The woman, draped in Chanel, signed the receipt with a flourish and left a 15% tip. Standard. Victoria cleared their table in under 90 seconds, resetting it with precision. Water glasses positioned exactly 1 inch from the knife's tip, napkins folded into perfect triangles, candles replaced. She didn't just serve at the Sterling Room, she studied it. Over 5 years, Victoria had catalogued every patron who walked through those doors. The hedge fund managers who ordered the 2005 Chateau Margaux to impress clients they were about to screw over. The tech entrepreneurs who wore $2,000 hoodies and still checked their phones during appetizers. The society wives who picked at $30 salads and discussed charity galas that cost more than most people's annual salaries. She knew their patterns, their tells, their weaknesses. She had once lived in their world. Now she observed it from the shadows, and the view was clarifying. Tori, refill the Pellegrino at 6. Harrison again, his voice tight. Victoria moved to the corner table where 3 women sat discussing a museum board position. As she poured sparkling water into crystal glasses, the sound like tiny bells, she caught fragments of their conversation. Politics, backstabbing, power plays over charity donations. The woman in the center, wearing a diamond bracelet that could fund a small country, gestured expansively and nearly knocked over her glass. Victoria caught it without a word, steadied it, vanished back into the background, invisible. Her right hand brushed against the thin platinum band she wore on her ring finger. The metal was smooth from 5 years of anxious habit, worn down by countless touches throughout endless shifts. It had belonged to her brother, Michael, his wedding ring, the only thing she'd kept from her old life, the only thing that reminded her who she used to be. The kitchen doors swung open with a burst of heat and noise, then closed again, sealing the chaos inside. Victoria picked up 2 plates, pan-seared scallops with cauliflower puree, micro greens arranged like art, and delivered them to table 9. The men didn't acknowledge her beyond a slight nod. She didn't expect them to. That was the transaction. They paid for invisibility, and she provided it. Most nights that was enough. Most nights she moved through her shift with the quiet discipline of someone who had learned to bury everything that made her dangerous. But tonight felt different. Harrison's anxiety had infected the entire staff. Sophie Kim, the youngest waitress, kept glancing toward the door like she expected a bomb to walk through it. Even Jean-Claude, the sommelier who normally moved with French nonchalance, seemed jumpy. "What's going on?" Victoria asked Sophie as they both refilled water pitchers at the service station. Sophie bit her lip. "You didn't hear. He's coming tonight." "Who?" "Julian Blackwell." Sophie's voice dropped to a whisper, as if saying the name too loud might summon him. "Harrison's been losing his mind all week. Blackwell's bringing some huge international deal here. Like, world-changing money, huge." Victoria's hand tightened imperceptibly on the water pitcher. "Julian Blackwell, the hedge fund guy? Blackwell Capital Management. $3 billion under management. Harrison said if we screw this up, we're all fired." Sophie's eyes were wide with worry. She was 26, a single mother putting herself through community college on tips and dreams. She couldn't afford to lose this job. Victoria could. She could walk out right now and never worry about money again. But that wasn't the point. The point was penance. The point was remembering what it meant to be human in a world that treated humans like commodities. "We won't screw it up," Victoria said gently. "Just do what you always do. Breathe. Stay present." Sophie nodded gratefully and hurried off to her section. Victoria stood for a moment at the service station, her reflection caught in the polished silver of a champagne bucket. Tired eyes, lines forming at the corners, hands that bore small scars from 5 years of hot plates and broken glass. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to be, a woman in her 30s, working a service job, invisible to the people who mattered. Perfect. Harrison appeared at her elbow, his face flushed. "Tori, I'm putting you on table 1 tonight. The big booth, Blackwell's table." Something cold flickered through her chest. "Why me?" "Because you're the best. You never make mistakes. You're invisible." Harrison said it like a compliment, like being erased was an achievement. "He's bringing 3 major investors, German, Chinese, and Middle Eastern money. This is a $200 million deal. I need you flawless." "Understood." "And Tori?" Harrison's voice dropped. "Don't engage. Don't make eye contact unless directly addressed. These people don't want conversation. They want efficiency. Got it?" "Got it." She had been erased before, by men who thought their money made them gods, by a system that valued wealth over integrity, by her own choice when fighting back had cost her everything. But Julian Blackwell didn't know any of that. As Victoria reset table 1, the restaurant's largest and most prestigious booth, positioned in the back corner with sight lines to the entire room, she allowed herself a moment of curiosity. She'd heard of Blackwell, of course. Everyone in finance had. He was a titan, ruthless, brilliant, the kind of man who made markets move with a single trade, the kind of man who probably didn't know the names of anyone who served him. She polished the silverware until it gleamed, adjusted the candles, made sure the leather-bound wine list was positioned perfectly. Then she stepped back and waited. At precisely 8:15 p.m., the front door opened, and the temperature in the Sterling room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Julian Blackwell had arrived. Victoria watched from her station as Harrison practically genuflected, taking Blackwell's coat with trembling hands. She watched as the man moved through the restaurant like he owned not just the room, but the air inside it. Tall, sharp-featured, wearing a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. He didn't look at any of the staff, not once. His eyes swept the space with the calculating gaze of someone assessing assets. And then he was walking toward her, toward table 1. Victoria's heart rate didn't change. Her breathing stayed steady. She had practiced this for 5 years. The art of not reacting, of being present but not seen, of observing everything while revealing nothing. Julian Blackwell slid into the booth without a word to her, without even a glance. Good. She had spent 5 years becoming invisible. She had buried Victoria Carmichael, the Titan, and built Tori the waitress from the ashes. She had learned to be no one. She dismissed it as just another arrogant billionaire dinner. Just another shift in a long string of shifts, where powerful men moved money around and forgot the people who served them. She was wrong. Julian Blackwell didn't walk into a room. He conquered it. Victoria had served hundreds of wealthy men over 5 years, but even from across the restaurant, she could feel the difference. Conversations didn't just pause as he moved through the Sterling room. They died mid-sentence. Heads turned. The entire ecosystem reorganized around his presence. He was tall, just over 6 feet, with the kind of build that suggested expensive personal trainers. His suit was charcoal brioni, probably $25,000 of Italian wool. The watch on his wrist caught the light. A Patek Philippe Nautilus, rose gold, easily $80,000. His hair was dark with silver at the temples, and his face was all sharp angles, a jawline that could cut glass, eyes the color of cold steel. Harrison hovered at his elbow like a nervous satellite. "Mr. Blackwell, your table is ready. The Chateau Margaux 2005. Decant it now. My guests arrive in 12 minutes. Julian's voice was a baritone that expected obedience. He didn't look at Harrison when he spoke. "Of course, sir. Right away." Julian slid into the booth at table 1, pulling out his phone. Victoria approached with water and a menu, her movements silent. She set the water down precisely. "Good evening, Mr. Blackwell. Welcome to Pellegrino. No ice, and I don't want to see you unless I wave." He didn't look up. His fingers moved rapidly across the screen. "Of course, sir." Victoria returned with the Pellegrino in under a minute. Julian was on a call now, his voice low but sharp. "I don't care what Shanghai says. The numbers work. We're acquiring Vance Technologies and that's final." He ended the call and finally looked up, but not at Victoria. He looked through her, his gaze catching on the empty booth across from him. "The wine? Jean-Claude is decanting it now, sir. 8 minutes. 6 minutes, not 8. He turned back to his phone, dismissing her. Victoria retreated. Sophie caught her eye and mouthed, "Okay." Victoria nodded. She'd dealt with worse. At 8:27 p.m. the first guest arrived. Herr Klaus Reinhardt entered with the dignified bearing of European old money. Early 60s, steel-gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses. His suit was conservative but impeccable. He carried a leather briefcase that looked 20 years old, the kind of wealth that didn't announce itself. Julian stood. "Klaus, good to see you." "Julian." Klaus shook his hand formally. "I hope this is more thorough than your preliminary materials. Reinhardt Industry Capital does not invest 500 million euros on optimism. You'll have everything you need." Victoria materialized with menus. Klaus nodded to her, actually acknowledged her, and said, "Thank you." The courtesy was unexpected. The second guest arrived minutes later. Ms. Mei Chen moved like a shark through water, smooth, purposeful, dangerous. 44, but looked younger, wearing a severe black Prada suit. Her hair was cut in a sharp bob, her eyes dark and analytical. She represented Chen Ventures, one of Shanghai's most aggressive tech consortiums. "Miss Chen," Julian stood again, "thank you for making the trip. I almost didn't. Your due diligence package was thin." May's English was precise. "This evening will provide substance." The third guest arrived at 8:41 p.m. Sheikh Omar al-Rashid didn't need to announce himself. Mid-50s, wearing a tailored Western suit beneath a white gutra secured with gold. His beard was immaculate, his eyes warm but penetrating. He represented Dubai's sovereign wealth, billions in capital. Sheikh al-Rashid. Julian's warmth reached its peak. "Julian, I trust this will be productive. Time is a gift from Allah. I do not waste gifts. You won't be disappointed." Jean-Claude arrived with the Chateau Margaux, pouring carefully into 4 glasses. The wine was the color of rubies, probably $5,000. Victoria watched from her station. 3 major investors, billions in combined capital. This wasn't just dinner, this was theater. "Tory," Harrison appeared, voice tight. "You're serving that table exclusively. Anticipate everything. Don't speak unless spoken to." "Understood." Julian began his pitch. "What I'm about to show you will change fintech in North America. Vance Technologies has developed a fraud detection algorithm that surpasses anything on the market. 47 million in annual recurring revenue, patents creating a 10-year moat, acquisition interest from every major bank." Victoria placed menus, her movements automatic. But when Julian said Vance Technologies, something triggered in her memory. A faint alarm bell. The acquisition price is 200 million, Julian continued. We close in 60 days. Within 18 months, we're looking at $1 billion exit. ROI at 400%. Klaus studied his wine. And the founder? Rachel Vance, MIT graduate, former Goldman analyst. Brilliant. A woman appeared at the entrance. Mid-30s, auburn hair, confident smile. Navy dress, perfect balance of professional and feminine. Allow me to introduce Rachel Vance. Rachel shook hands with each investor, her grip firm. She slid into the booth next to Julian, and they synchronized like practice partners. Ms. Vance, Klaus began, how does your algorithm differ from existing systems? As Rachel launched into technical details, Victoria served courses silently, but her mind was working. Vance Technologies. She knew that name. The evening progressed. Appetizers arrived. Victoria cleared plates like a ghost. The conversation grew more intense. Financial projections, market analysis, competitive advantages. Then it happened. A young busboy approached to refill water. His hand shook. His elbow caught Julian's wine glass. The Chateau Margaux spilled across the white tablecloth in a spreading crimson stain. The busboy froze, face draining of color. I'm so sorry. Julian's expression didn't change, but something cold entered his eyes. He pulled out his wallet, extracted $200 bills, and placed them in the wine stain. Take it, Julian said quietly. Buy yourself some coordination lessons. The busboy grabbed the money and fled. Victoria watched, her hand touching the platinum band on her finger. Casual cruelty. Money as a weapon. She'd seen this before. The table returned to business. New wine arrived. The moment passed. But Victoria didn't forget. At 9:15 p.m., Julian waved her over. We need the check. Clear these plates. We're moving to the presentation. Victoria collected dessert plates silently. As she turned, Rachel Vance laughed and mentioned quarterly projections that made Victoria's blood run cold. Those numbers. She'd heard them before, in a context that had everything to do with fraud. At 9:47 p.m., as Julian led his guests toward the private dining room, everything clicked. She knew exactly who Rachel Vance was. She knew what Vance Technologies really was, and she knew Julian Blackwell was about to sign a $200 million death warrant. Victoria stood in the dining room, heart rate calm, breathing steady. She could stay invisible. Let this play out. It wasn't her problem. But then she thought about the busboy, about Sophie, about everyone Julian Blackwell had dismissed as furniture. And she thought about her brother, Michael. At 9:47 p.m., Julian Blackwell would make a choice. He would throw money at the wrong waitress, and the world would shift. The private dining room at the Sterling Room was soundproofed, designed for exactly this kind of moment. Leather chairs, polished walnut table, lighting that created intimacy. Julian had reserved it for 3 hours at $5,000. Victoria had been inside 47 times in 5 years. She knew every detail. The service entrance, the single window overlooking 67th Street. Harrison assigned her exclusively. Stay invisible. Water, wine, coffee. Don't listen, don't react, don't exist. She nodded. Invisibility had always been her weapon. At 9:52 p.m., Victoria entered carrying fresh wine glasses. The presentation had begun. Rachel Vance stood at the head, laptop connected to a screen displaying financial projections. Our customer acquisition cost has dropped 40% year over year while retention climbed to 92%, Rachel said confidently. This is current performance. Victoria refilled water glasses mechanically. Klaus took notes. May's fingers flew across her phone. Sheikh Omar sat thoughtfully, fingers steepled. Julian watched Rachel with satisfaction. Our fraud detection accuracy rate is 98.4%, Rachel continued. Next closest competitor is 89%. We're in a different category. Victoria caught a glimpse of the screen. Revenue projections, customer lists. The numbers were impressive. Too impressive. She retreated to the corner, hands folded, eyes down. Invisible. The intellectual property alone is worth the acquisition price, Julian said. 3 separate valuations confirm 200 million is conservative. Patents can be challenged, May said. What's your defensibility? 17 patents, across 4 jurisdictions. Core algorithm protected by trade secret. Even reverse engineering would need 3 years and 50 million in R&D. Victoria's mind raced. She'd built a company once, Real growth was messy, uneven. This was too smooth, too perfect. Then Rachel clicked to strategic partners, and Victoria's breath caught. Second row of logos. Quantum Edge Solutions. Quantum Edge. She'd sued them 5 years ago. Shell company. Fraud. Dissolved in 2022 after SEC investigation. They didn't exist anymore. But Rachel listed them as an active partner. $8 million contract. Victoria's hand moved to the platinum band, twisting it. If Quantum Edge was fake, what else was? Data Stream Analytics, acquired 3 years ago, no longer operating. Meridian Financial, bankruptcy 2023. Rachel Vance was running an elaborate con, and Julian Blackwell was about to write a $200 million check for it. Questions? Rachel asked. Klaus tapped his pen. I want to see customer contracts, actual signed agreements. My legal team can provide those tomorrow. I want to speak with your engineering lead, May added. I'll arrange it. Sheikh Omar leaned forward. What happens if you're hit by a bus tomorrow? Does this survive? Rachel laughed. That's why this acquisition makes sense. Blackwell has infrastructure to scale beyond any single person. Julian stood. I've seen enough. We'll have term sheets by Friday. Closing in 60 days. Klaus and May exchanged glances. Not fully convinced, but Julian's confidence was absolute. Let's celebrate, Julian said. Tori, he snapped fingers without looking. Bring them Macallan 25. 4 glasses. Victoria moved toward the door. She could walk away, serve scotch, let Julian sign his death warrant. But $200 million, 3 decent investors, and Julian who threw money at people like insults. She thought about the busboy, Sophie, 5 years watching powerful men hurt people. She thought about Michael. She set the tray down with a soft, deliberate click. Her hands were steady. Inside, something dormant for 5 years was waking. Victoria walked to the main dining room. Harrison polished glasses anxiously. Sophie served table 6. Normal rhythm continued, oblivious to the fraud about to be sealed. Then the door opened. Julian emerged laughing. He moved toward the booth, his investors following. He didn't glance at Victoria, just a waitress, invisible. Julian pulled out his wallet as he sat. Victoria approached with menus. He peeled off 5 $100 bills and tossed them onto the table without looking at her. That's your month's rent, he said casually. Pick it up and disappear. We're done with service. The bills landed with a soft sound that echoed. Sophie gasped. Harrison froze. May's eyes widened. Klaus set down his glass. The Sheikh's expression hardened. Victoria didn't move. She looked at the $500. At Julian's face, so certain. At Rachel beside him, con about to succeed. She made her choice. Victoria bent down slowly, but she didn't pick up the money. She picked up Rachel's leather portfolio. Vance Technologies. Investor presentation. When she stood, her posture had changed. Shoulders back, chin up, eyes meeting Julian's directly for the first time. Mr. Blackwell, she said, voice no longer soft. Before you sign anything, there's something you should know. The restaurant went silent. In that split second, Victoria Hayes Carmichael ceased to be a waitress. The invisible girl was gone. In her place stood something forged in boardrooms, honed by betrayal, utterly capable. And Julian Blackwell was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. Julian Blackwell stared at Victoria like she'd materialized out of thin air. For 5 years, she'd been furniture. Now she was standing at his table, holding Rachel Vance's presentation portfolio, her voice carrying authority that made heads turn. Excuse me. Julian's tone was ice. I don't recall asking for your opinion. You didn't, Victoria said calmly. But you're about to lose $200 million on fraud. So I thought I'd mention it. The silence was crushing. Every conversation in the Sterling room died. Harrison dropped a wine glass. It shattered like a gunshot. Rachel Vance went pale. Julian, I don't know what she... Mr. Blackwell, Victoria continued, never breaking eye contact. Vance Technologies reports $47 million in annual revenue through strategic partners. She opened the portfolio. This partner, Quantum Edge Solutions, $8 million contract. Impressive, except Quantum Edge was dissolved in 2022 following an SEC investigation. I know because I sued them. They don't exist. Klaus leaned forward. May's fingers stopped moving. The Sheikh's eyes narrowed. It would be impressive, Victoria said, if it were real. Rachel stood abruptly. This is absurd. Julian, sit down. Mei Chen's voice was quiet but absolute. Her phone was already out. Quantum Edge Solutions. Dissolved February 2022. Public record. She looked at Victoria. You're correct. I usually am, Victoria said. Data Stream Analytics. 12 million listed. Acquired by Oracle in 2021. No longer independent. Meridian Financial Systems. Bankruptcy 2023. Should I continue? Klaus was writing rapidly. Mein Gott, the sheikh spoke, his voice carrying weight. Young lady, how do you know this? Victoria's eyes met his. The mask cracked. Something fierce looked out. Because I built a fraud detection company worth $50 million. And I spent 3 years fighting people exactly like Ms. Vance. Julian finally found his voice. Who the hell are you? My name, Victoria said, and for the first time in 5 years spoke it fully, is Victoria Hayes Carmichael, CEO and co-founder of Carmichael Technologies. We developed the first AI-driven fraud detection for fintech. We sold for $50 million 5 years ago. She paused. You may have heard of us. Color drained from Julian's face. Klaus dropped his pen. May's eyes went wide. The sheikh smiled. Carmichael Technologies, Klaus whispered. The ghost investor. I prefer anonymity, Victoria said. But yes. Impossible, Rachel stammered. You're a waitress. I am a waitress. I've been one for 5 years. Before that, I was a tech CEO. Before that, MIT graduate, double major in computer science and applied mathematics. Right now, I'm the person who just saved Mr. Blackwell from the stupidest investment of his career. She turned to the investors. Ms. Vance's company is a shell game. Patents are derivative or non-existent. The engineering team of 23? I'd be shocked if she has 5 employees. The 98.4% accuracy. Mathematically suspicious. Our system achieved 96% after 4 years and $50 million in R&D. May typed furiously. Patent database. Carmichael Technologies holds primary patents. Filed 2019 active. She glared at Rachel. Yours are continuations. Derivative. Weak. This is slander, Rachel tried. I will sue. With what? Victoria asked mildly. The company that doesn't exist? Julian stared at Victoria like seeing her for the first time, which he was. Victoria Carmichael, you've been serving me for 5 years. You've come here for 3. You never looked at my face. Never said please or thank you. Tonight you threw $500 at me and told me to disappear. She gestured at the money. You didn't recognize me because you never saw me. The weight settled like a physical thing. Klaus cleared his throat. Ms. Carmichael, can you provide documentation? Victoria pulled out her phone. iPhone 15 Pro, Julian noticed suddenly, and within seconds was projecting to the display screen. Financial documents appeared. SEC filings, patent registrations, dissolution records. Quantum Edge, dissolved, data stream, acquired, Meridian, bankruptcy, and here, the original Carmichael patent, January 2019. Compared to what Ms. Vance presented. May read, expression darkening. Algorithms nearly identical. IP theft. Rachel tried once more. Julian, you can't believe... But Julian wasn't looking at Rachel. He was looking at Victoria. Really looking. Tired eyes. Calloused hands. The platinum band worn smooth. And beneath everything, unmistakable intelligence. My God, he whispered. The ghost investor. We've been trying to meet with you for 18 months. Victoria's smile was cold. I know. I declined every request. The sheikh laughed. Extraordinary. Ms. Carmichael, please. He gestured to the booth. Sit. Victoria looked at the booth. At the investors watching with new eyes. At Julian, who finally saw her. At Rachel, whose con had exploded. She untied her apron slowly, folded it precisely, placed it on the silver tray with Julian's $500, and Victoria Hayes Carmichael sat down, not as a waitress, as an equal. Harrison stood frozen. Sophie had tears streaming. Throughout the Sterling Room, Manhattan's elite whispered. Hello, Mr. Blackwell, Victoria said. Now that you're actually looking at me, shall we discuss real fraud detection? Julian opened his mouth. No words came. Klaus acted first. Doctor, Carmichael, would you consult on this investment? Your expertise is exactly what we need. I'd be delighted. $25,000 per day. My first recommendation, run from Vance Technologies. The sheikh nodded. We shall take that advice. Ms. Vance, this meeting is concluded. Rachel stood, flushed with rage. You'll regret this. The only regret, May said coldly, is almost investing in fraud. Security will escort you out. As Rachel fled, Victoria sat calmly at the table she'd served for 5 years. The invisible waitress had vanished. A titan remained, and Julian Blackwell could only stare at the most expensive mistake he'd never made, because the woman he'd humiliated had just saved him from ruin. 5 years earlier, San Francisco, California. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Transamerica Pyramid overlooked the bay. Victoria Carmichael, 27 years old, stood at the windows watching fog roll across the water. Behind her, her brother Michael paced. At 32, he was her CFO, the numbers to her vision. Together, they'd built Carmichael Technologies, 35 employees, partnerships with 6 major banks, a fraud detection algorithm the Wall Street Journal called revolutionary. They're offering $200 million, Michael said. Vicky, we bootstrapped on credit cards 3 years ago. Victoria turned. It's not enough. We're worth $300 million. Thomas is lowballing. Thomas Everett, her co-founder, the man she'd trusted with 40% of the company, currently negotiating their acquisition without her. Thomas says the board wants to move fast, Michael said carefully. Thomas wants to move fast because he negotiated his own package. He gets $70 million. I get 60 for a company I designed. The door opened. Thomas walked in. All California confidence and venture capital smile. 35. Stanford MBA. Connected to everyone. Great news. $200 million closing in 30 days. I didn't agree, Victoria said. The board voted 7-2. I control 60% of voting shares. Thomas's smile had edges now. You control 58%. I acquired 2% last week. Enough to shift board dynamics. The vote was legitimate. Victoria felt the world tilt. You bought shares to dilute my control? I secured rational business decisions. Sign the papers or get left behind. He left. The door clicked shut. Over 3 months, Thomas systematically dismantled her. The board turned. He'd cultivated relationships while she coded. Investors sided with him. He spoke their language. Media bought his narrative. Temperamental female founder can't handle success. Then Thomas made his final move. He produced audio recordings. Doctored, deep-faked. Victoria's voice discussing insider trading, bribing executives, falsifying results. I'm prepared to go to the SEC, Thomas told her, his lawyer beside him. Or you take $50 million, sign an NDA, disappear. Michael gets 25 and keeps his reputation. Or I destroy you both. Michael was there. Michael, who had a wife and 2-year-old daughter. Don't, Michael whispered. We'll fight. But Victoria did the math. 3 years of litigation. Millions in legal fees. Media crucifixion. Michael's family in the crossfire. I'll take the deal, she said. $50 million. Michael gets 30. We're done. 6 weeks to finalize. 6 weeks watching Thomas parade as the genius behind her company. 6 weeks watching her name erased. 6 weeks watching Michael grow thinner, quieter, more brittle. The day she signed, she walked into San Francisco sunshine and threw up in an alley. Michael found her there. We'll build something else, something better, I promise. 2 months later, Michael was dead. Heart attack, stress-induced, 32 years old. The battle, the betrayal, it had broken his heart. Victoria stood at his funeral holding his wedding ring. No one mentioned Thomas Everett. No one mentioned her brother had died fighting a con man. After the funeral, Victoria drove to New York City. She checked into a cheap hotel in Queens and made a decision. Thomas had made her invisible by erasing her name. Fine. She'd be invisible completely. She'd disappear into the world people like him never saw. She'd watch, study, learn how they operated when no one important was looking. 3 weeks later, Victoria Hayes Carmichael walked into the Sterling Room with a fabricated resume. Harrison hired her. She took Michael's ring and wore it on her right hand. A reminder, a promise. She would never be a victim again. Back in the Sterling Room, present day. The air was thick. Julian stared at Victoria with new understanding. 5 years ago, he said slowly, you disappeared. The tech world thought you'd had a breakdown. I did, Victoria said simply. My brother died. My company was stolen. I was erased. so I became someone else. Klaus's expression was pained. The narrative was that you couldn't handle pressure. The narrative, Victoria said, voice hard, was written by a man who committed fraud and threatened my family. So I disappeared. I took the settlement. I saved my brother's reputation. Then he died anyway. The Sheikh's eyes were full of understanding. And you came here to learn what men like us look like when we think no one is watching. Yes, for 5 years I've served Manhattan's elite. I've watched billion-dollar deals. I've seen marriages destroyed. I've listened to men like Mr. Blackwell treat humans like furniture. She looked at Julian. Tonight, you threw money at my feet. You dismissed me as irrelevant. Julian's face paled. I didn't know. You didn't need to know my story to treat me like a human being, Victoria said quietly. You never saw me because you never thought I mattered. May spoke softly. Ms. Carmichael, what you described, Thomas Everett committed felonies. Why didn't you prosecute? Victoria touched the platinum band. Because my brother had just died. Because I had no fight left. Because sometimes survival means walking away. She paused. But tonight, when I saw Rachel Vance running the same con that destroyed my life, I couldn't walk away. Not again. Silence. Finally, Julian spoke. Victoria, I've spent 3 years coming here. I never learned your name. Never saw your face. I treated you like you didn't exist. His voice cracked. And you just saved me from losing $200 million. After I humiliated you. Yes. Why? Victoria smiled. Small, sad, real. Because Sophie Kim is a single mother putting herself through college on tips. Because the busboy you humiliated sends money to Guatemala. Because I spent 5 years remembering what it means to be human. She paused. And because men like Thomas Everett and Rachel Vance only win when good people stay silent. She stood, picking up her apron. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a shift to finish. Wait, the Sheikh said. Please sit. We have much to discuss. Victoria looked at the 3 investors, at Julian, who had finally seen her, at the restaurant that had been her refuge for 5 years. She sat back down, not as a waitress, as Victoria Hayes Carmichael, survivor, and the woman who had just changed everything. Victoria sat at the table, no longer invisible, and watched 3 of the world's most powerful investors process what they'd just learned. Julian Blackwell looked like a man who'd been hit by a truck. Rachel Vance was gone, escorted out by security, her $200 million con in ruins, and the Sterling Room hummed with whispered speculation. Klaus Reinhardt was the first to speak. He set down his pen with Germanic precision. Ms. Carmichael, I must ask directly, can you provide verifiable documentation of Ms. Vance's fraud? Victoria pulled out her phone again. I can do better than that. I can show you the pattern. Her fingers moved across the screen. Quantum Edge Solutions wasn't just dissolved. It was specifically shut down for the exact type of contract fraud Rachel is attempting now. The SEC case file is public record. She projected another document. Here's the original complaint. Filed by Carmichael Technologies. Filed by me. 3 fake contracts totaling $12 million. Sound familiar? Mei Chen was already typing, cross-referencing data. The methodology is identical. Shell companies with impressive names. Contracts that look legitimate on surface review. Revenue recognition that inflates valuation. She looked up, her expression cold. This is not coincidence. This is a playbook. Exactly, Victoria said. Rachel Vance either worked with the Quantum Edge team or studied their methods. Either way, she's replicating a known fraud. The Sheikh leaned back, his fingers steepled. And you recognized this immediately because you prosecuted the original. I spent 2 years building the case against Quantum Edge while running my company, Victoria said. I know every detail. When I saw that logo on Rachel's presentation, everything clicked. Julian had been silent, but now he spoke, his voice hollow. How much would I have lost? Victoria met his eyes. All of it. 200 million on a company worth maybe 10 million in real assets. Rachel would have dragged out the integration for 18 months, extracted consulting fees, then declared bankruptcy and disappeared. Standard fraud playbook. You'd spend 5 years in litigation trying to recover pennies on the dollar. Mein Gott, Klaus breathed. Julian, your due diligence was garbage, May finished coldly. No offense, Julian, but this was surface-level work. You were so confident in your own judgment you didn't verify fundamentals. Julian's jaw clenched. I had a team. You had analysts who told you what you wanted to hear, Victoria said, not unkindly. It happens, especially when someone like Rachel Vance is good at their con. She's charming, credentialed, speaks the language. She makes you feel smart for believing her. The sheikh nodded slowly. This is true. But Miss Carmichael, you stopped it. Why? Victoria touched the platinum band on her finger. Because 5 years ago, someone like Rachel destroyed my life. And tonight, I watched her about to do it again. I couldn't stay silent. Even though Julian treated you with contempt, May said. It wasn't a question. Even though, Victoria confirmed. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Harrison appeared at the table's edge, his face pale. Ms. Carmichael, I'm fine, Harrison, Victoria said gently. But Sophie might need support. This has been a lot. Harrison nodded and retreated. The restaurant was still buzzing, but at a respectful distance. Klaus cleared his throat. Ms. Carmichael, I must make a proposal. Reinhardt Industry Capital requires expertise in fraud detection and due diligence. Your skills are exactly what we need. I would like to offer you a position as Chief Risk Officer. Salary negotiable, but I'm thinking $2 million annually plus equity. Victoria blinked. That's generous. That's desperate, Klaus said honestly. You just saved us from a catastrophic investment. I want you on our side. May leaned forward. Chen Ventures makes a counteroffer. Managing Director of Due Diligence. $3 million annually. Full autonomy. You evaluate every deal we consider. The sheikh smiled. I will not be outdone. Consulting partnership with our sovereign wealth fund. $5 million annually. You review all North American investments. Plus, we fund any venture you wish to start. $20 million seed capital. No questions asked. Victoria stared at them. 5 years ago, she'd lost everything. Tonight, she was being offered more than she'd ever imagined. But she wasn't finished. Those are remarkable offers, Victoria said carefully. But I have conditions. Julian spoke for the first time in minutes. Name them. Victoria turned to him. First, Mr. Blackwell, you issue a public statement about tonight. You acknowledge that a waitress, a service worker you dismissed, saved your company from massive fraud. You commit to mandatory respect training for all Blackwell Capital employees. And you fund a scholarship program for service industry workers pursuing business education. Julian's face went through several emotions. Pride, resistance, and finally, acceptance. Done. Second, Victoria continued, looking at all three investors. I don't want a job. I want a partnership. I want to build something new. An investment fund focused on ethical companies, transparent governance, and worker dignity. I want you three as founding partners. But I want control. Klaus raised his eyebrows. You want us to fund a competitor. I want you to fund the future, Victoria said. A fund that proves you can make extraordinary returns without exploiting people. That treats workers as assets, not costs. That values integrity over quarterly results. May was smiling now. You want to disrupt the entire industry. I want to fix it, Victoria corrected. And I want your capital, your networks, and your credibility to do it. The sheikh laughed, a genuine sound of delight. This is why you are the ghost investor. You do not think small. Third condition, Victoria said, her voice hardening. I want a full investigation into Rachel Vance. Criminal charges, SEC involvement, everything. She doesn't get to walk away and do this to someone else. Already calling our legal team, May said, phone to her ear. And fourth, Victoria said, looking directly at Julian. Sophie Kim gets a full scholarship to Columbia Business School, funded by Blackwell Capital. Not just tuition, living expenses, childcare, everything. She's brilliant, she's hardworking, and she deserves a chance. Julian nodded slowly. Consider it done. Victoria sat back. Then, gentlemen, Miss Chen, you have a deal. Klaus extended his hand across the table. To the Carmichael Reinhardt Chen Fund. May it change the world. They shook, one by one, sealing a partnership born from fraud exposed and dignity restored. As they discussed terms and structure, Harrison approached again, this time with a bottle, not wine, but champagne. Dom Perignon, probably $1,000. Compliments of the house, Harrison said quietly. Ms. Carmichael, I had no idea. Victoria smiled at him. That's because I didn't want you to know, Harrison. You gave me a job when I needed one. You treated me fairly. Thank you. Harrison's eyes were wet. He nodded and retreated. The sheikh raised his glass. To Victoria Hayes Carmichael, who reminded us that the most dangerous person in any room is the one you don't see. They drank. The champagne was crisp and cold and tasted like vindication. Julian set down his glass. Victoria, I need to say something. His voice was different now, humbled. For 3 years I came to this restaurant and treated you like furniture. I never saw you. Tonight you saved me from financial ruin after I humiliated you. I don't have words. Try I'm sorry, Victoria said simply. I'm sorry, truly, and I'm grateful, and I promise you, I will be different. Victoria studied him. He looked smaller now, his arrogance stripped away. Good. Actions, Mr. Blackwell, not words. Show me you've learned. I will. As midnight approached, the table began to disperse. Klaus had calls to make. May had legal teams to mobilize. The sheikh had prayers to complete. But before they left, each of them shook Victoria's hand again. Monday morning, Klaus said. My office. We start building. I'll be there, Victoria promised. As they filed out, Julian remained. He looked at the $500 still sitting on the table where he'd thrown it. What do I do with this? He asked. Victoria smiled. Give it to Sophie, with an apology. Julian picked up the money, nodded, and went to find her. Victoria sat alone at table 1 for the first time in 5 years. She looked around the Sterling room, the velvet banquettes, the crystal chandeliers, the marble floors that had swallowed so many of her silent footsteps. She'd come here broken. She'd stayed invisible, observing, surviving. And tonight, she'd stepped into the light and changed everything. Harrison approached with a small envelope. This came for you, just now. Courier. Victoria opened it. Inside was a simple card with a phone number and a message in elegant script. Call me. We should talk. Thomas Everett. Victoria stared at the card for a long moment. Then she smiled, cold and sharp, and tucked it into her pocket. Thomas Everett had made her invisible once. He'd stolen her company, her identity, her brother. But Victoria Hayes Carmichael wasn't invisible anymore. And she had $50 million, 3 powerful partners, and 5 years of patient observation. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. 6 months later. The offices of Carmichael Reinhardt Chen occupied the 52nd floor of 1 Vanderbilt, with views that stretched from the Hudson to the East River. Victoria stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching January snow dust the Manhattan skyline, and marveled at how much had changed. Behind her, the office hummed with controlled energy. 40 employees now, 12 active investments, $2.4 billion in committed capital, and a mission statement that hung in the lobby. Profit with dignity, growth with integrity, wealth that lifts everyone. Her office was minimalist, glass desk, Herman Miller chair, a single photograph of Michael in a silver frame. The platinum band still circled her right finger, but it meant something different now. Not just grief, legacy. Ms. Carmichael? Her assistant poked her head in. Mr. Blackwell is here for his appointment. Victoria checked her watch. 3 p.m. exactly. Send him in. Julian Blackwell entered, and Victoria almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the $25,000 suit, replaced by something more modest. Gone was the arrogance in his posture. He looked humbler, uncertain, human. Victoria, he said, thank you for seeing me. Sit. Victoria gestured to the chair across from her desk. You've requested this meeting every week for 6 months. I declined the first 23. Why today? Julian sat carefully. Because I've done the work you asked. Respect training for every employee at Blackwell Capital. Mandatory. 30 hours. I took it myself, publicly. He pulled out his phone, showed her documentation. The scholarship fund is active. Sophie Kim started at Columbia last semester. Full ride, living expenses, childcare covered. Victoria reviewed the documents. Thorough, legitimate. And the public statement? Published in the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and Bloomberg. Julian's voice was quiet. I told the story. How a waitress I dismissed saved me from a $200 million fraud. How I'd been blind to people I considered beneath me. It was humbling. Good, Victoria said. Humility looks better on you than arrogance. Julian met her eyes. I want to invest in your fund. Victoria raised an eyebrow. You know our terms. Ethical companies only, transparent governance, worker equity requirements. It's not your usual playbook. I know. That's why I want in. You're proving it works. 12 investments, 0 failures, 28% average returns. You're beating the market while treating people like humans. He leaned forward. Let me learn from you, please. Victoria studied him. 6 months ago, this man had thrown money at her feet, had dismissed her as irrelevant. Now he was asking permission to participate in her vision. Conditional, Victoria said. You invest, but you're a limited partner, no control. You attend our quarterly meetings. You listen to the companies we support, many founded by immigrants, women, people of color. You learn. Yes, whatever you require. And Julian? Victoria's voice hardened. If you slip back into old patterns, if I hear about you treating anyone in your organization with contempt, I pull your investment and publicize why. Understood? Understood. Victoria nodded. Then welcome to CRC Fund. Minimum investment is $10 million. Paperwork will be ready by Friday. Julian stood, extended his hand. Thank you. For the second chance. Victoria shook it. Don't thank me. Thank Sophie. She suggested I give you this opportunity. After Julian left, Victoria returned to the window. The city stretched below, millions of invisible people making it work. She thought about all the service workers she'd known, the housekeepers, delivery drivers, nannies, cooks, the architecture of civilization, treated as disposable. Not anymore. Not in her world. Ms. Carmichael? Her assistant again. Your 4 o'clock is here. The university event coordinator. Send them in. That evening, Victoria stood at a podium in Columbia Business School's auditorium. The room was packed. Students, faculty, press. Sophie Kim sat in the front row, beaming. 5 years ago, Victoria began, I was a waitress at an expensive Manhattan restaurant. Before that, I was a tech CEO. The journey between those two identities taught me everything I know about power, dignity, and who we choose to see. She told the story. Not all of it. Some wounds were still private, but enough. Thomas Everett's betrayal, Michael's death, 5 years of invisibility, and one November night when she'd stopped staying silent. I'm not here to tell you that losing everything was good, Victoria said. It was devastating, but I learned something in those 5 years serving people who never saw me. The most important people in any economy are the ones we dismiss as just something. Just a waitress, just a driver, just a cleaner. She paused. Let it sink in. They see everything. They know everything. And they're often more competent than the people they serve. We've built an economy that extracts value from their labor while denying their humanity. That has to change. The applause was thunderous. During the Q&A, a young woman raised her hand. Ms. Carmichael, what happened to Rachel Vance? Victoria's expression hardened. Ms. Vance is currently serving 8 years in federal prison for wire fraud, securities fraud, and criminal conspiracy. The SEC investigation found she'd attempted this scheme 17 times over 6 years. We caught her on the 18th. More applause. Another question. And Thomas Everett? Victoria smiled. That's pending. But justice is patient. After the event, Sophie caught her in the hallway. Dr. Carmichael, thank you for everything. I couldn't do this without you. Victoria hugged her. You earned this, Sophie. You were always brilliant. I just gave you the chance to prove it. 1 week later, Victoria received an email that made her pause. From Thomas Everett. Subject: We should talk, Victoria. I've watched your rise. Impressive. You've built something remarkable from the ashes I left you in. Perhaps we can discuss a partnership. I have ventures that could benefit from your newfound influence. Best regards. Thomas. Victoria read it twice. Then she forwarded it to her legal team with a single instruction. Add to evidence file. We move when ready. Thomas Everett thought she'd forgotten. He thought 5 years had dulled her memory of what he'd taken. He was wrong. But unlike Thomas, Victoria didn't need to destroy him immediately. She had time. She had resources. And she had something he'd never possessed. Patience and integrity. The reckoning would come, but it would come on her terms. That evening, Victoria attended a small opening for a worker-owned restaurant in Brooklyn. CRC Fund had provided seed capital. The owner, a former line cook, gave a speech about dignity and ownership that brought Victoria to tears. After the speeches, Victoria helped bus tables. The staff tried to stop her. "Ms. Carmichael, you're an investor." But she smiled and kept working. A young waiter, maybe 19, dropped a tray of glasses. They shattered spectacularly. He froze, face draining of color. Victoria walked over calmly. "Hey, breathe. It's just glass." "I'm so sorry, Ms. Carmichael, I'll pay for—" "You'll do no such thing. Accidents happen." She grabbed a broom, started sweeping. "What's your name?" "Carlos." "Carlos, how long have you been working here?" 2 months. I'm putting myself through City College." Victoria smiled. "Keep going. Education changes everything. And Carlos, never let anyone make you feel small. You matter. Your work matters. Don't forget that." Carlos's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." As Victoria swept glass into a dustpan, she thought about the young woman she'd been at the Sterling Room. Invisible, dismissed, patient. That woman had saved Julian Blackwell from ruin, had exposed Rachel Vance's fraud, had built a fund that proved profit and dignity weren't mutually exclusive. And now Victoria Hayes Carmichael stood in a worker-owned restaurant she'd helped fund, sweeping glass because a young man needed to know he mattered. She looked at the platinum band on her finger. "I kept the promise, Michael. I didn't forget. I'll never forget. The most powerful person in the room isn't always the loudest. Sometimes it's the one you dismissed as just a waitress. Sometimes it's the one who learned to see everyone while staying invisible herself." Victoria had been invisible for 5 years, but she'd never been powerless. She'd been watching, learning, waiting, and when the moment came, she'd changed everything, not with cruelty, not with revenge, with truth, integrity, and the simple revolutionary act of treating humans like humans. She didn't just reclaim her fortune, she reclaimed her voice, and in a world that tried to make her invisible, she became impossible to ignore.